All right, welcome back to Vuln Vibes, everybody. Today we're going deep on a security incident
Yeah.
that really has everybody talking, especially in the dev world,
Yeah.
and that is the compromise of a really popular GitHub action called TJ Actions Changed Files.
Yeah, it's a story that has big implications for everybody in the security space.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
So for our listeners who maybe aren't, in GitHub Actions every day, could you give us a little rundown of what happened here?
Sure, yeah. So TJ Actions Change Files was kind of a go-to tool for a lot of developers. Over 23,000 repositories were using this,
Wow.
which is, it's a lot. And so what it did was, pretty simple. It helped figure out what files had changed in a commit.
Right.
And that
Yeah.
can be used to, automate all sorts of stuff in your workflow.
Makes sense. So useful, popular, pretty harmless on the surface. What went wrong?
Well, that's where it gets, kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So the folks over at Step Security, they uncovered this breach. And what's kind of fascinating is that they did it through anomaly detection. So they have a tool called Harden Runner that looks
Okay.
at network traffic.
Right.
And, they saw an unexpected endpoint, and they're like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
that's kind of fishy.
That's not supposed to be there.
Right. That's not supposed to be there.
Hold on. So no 0-day, no crazy social engineering scheme.
Yeah.
They got caught because of just a weird URL, basically.
Sometimes the simplest methods, right? The
Yeah.
simplest methods are the most effective. But the attackers, they weren't simple in how they approached it. They didn't just, modify the actions code.
Right.
They went back and retroactively updated the version tags to point to the malicious code. So
Yeah.
it's like sneaking in a bad apple into a barrel and making it look like it's always been there.
No,
Yeah.
it's like a poisoned well, right? You think you're going back for a drink from the same safe place and oh,
Right.
you got a problem.
Ugh.
So
Yeah.
what was the end game here? What were the attackers trying to get?
Right. So think about your project's most sensitive information, API keys,
Okay.
database passwords,
Right.
the crown jewels that you really don't want exposed.
Right. Yeah.
Those are your CI/CD secrets, basically.
Wow.
And this code that the attackers injected, it was designed to steal those secrets
Yeah.
right out from under our noses from the runner worker process, which
Yeah.
is kind of, the engine room of the whole workflow.
And just to kind of sprinkle a little more salt in the wound here, this compromised action could actually print those secrets directly in the GitHub Actions build logs.
Yeah.
And we all know, especially for public repositories, those are essentially public billboards.
Right, exactly. And this whole thing, it really underscores this trend that we're seeing, that we've been talking about in the threat landscape for a while now, which is supply chain attacks. You compromise a single popular tool like TJ Action Changed Files, and you can end up impacting, thousands of projects downstream.
It's a good thing that Step Security and GitHub acted so quickly.
Mhm.
So Step Security came out with a secure drop-in replacement. Step Security changed files.
Yeah.
Shout out to the security researchers out there, always on the front lines.
Yeah, absolutely.
Keeping us all safe, keeping us all informed.
Absolutely.
And GitHub, to their credit, they wasted no time in taking down the compromised action.
Yeah.
Really strong move there to kind of contain the damage.
Yeah.
So for our listeners who, I imagine a lot of people have used this action, what's the damage control plan here?
Okay, first things first, replace that compromised action immediately.
Okay.
The one from Step Security, that's the go-to.
Right.
Second, you got to take a good hard look at your inventory of actions.
Yeah.
You need to make absolutely sure that you are not using this compromised version
Right.
anywhere.
Right.
And don't forget about those GitHub Actions workflow run logs.
Oh, yeah, especially for public repos.
Especially for public repositories, you got to check those carefully.
Right.
Look for any leaked secrets.
Yeah,
If
no.
you find any, rotate them as soon as possible. Time is of the essence.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This whole thing just feels like a real wake-up call, doesn't it?
It does.
It's a reminder that this isn't just a GitHub problem. It really affects all of us.
Yeah.
It's a vulnerability that exists in all of our development pipelines.
Yeah. Yeah. It really raises the question, right? How do we build more robust systems? How do we, as a community come together to make this better?
Absolutely.
And I think this incident really drives home the point that security is a shared responsibility. It's not just on, the security team or
Right.
the platform. It's everybody. It's developers, security researchers, platforms.
Yeah.
We all have a role to play
Absolutely.
in making our systems more secure and more resilient because the threat landscape is constantly changing. And best defense is always going to be a proactive one.
That's right. Well said. Well, on that note, thanks for joining us, everybody, on this week's Vuln Vibes. And we will catch you next time.
See you next